Before I begin, I want to say that I have total respect for the dev team and the community. It seems like a really nice community with fans that are willing to answer questions about the underlying technical structure of the game. It's commendable that Undead Labs is still updating and tweaking the game years later based on player feedback. I also want to clarify that these are my thoughts on my first playthrough on standard difficulty. I'm not entirely sure what to make of State of Decay 2. I had a lot of high hopes for the sequel because I really liked the first one. The first one felt like the team's passion project. It's not for everyone, but I personally got hooked on the endless cycle of exploring and looting to keep my base and survivors alive. The gameplay was simple enough, with the game itself being pretty straightforward. It felt really cool to dive into a never-ending zombie-infested world and search for materials to stay alive. Ever since the first Dead Rising game, I've had this dream game in my head of a survival zombie game, where you can build your own base and modify and craft stuff and just keep surviving. So when I heard that State of Decay 2 existed, I had high hopes. So much of what I wanted was there in the first game, and I had all these ideas of what I thought would be the next logical step for the franchise. I feel like the real game is actually not so much the video game, and not so much survival, but it's just keeping track of stats. Which is cool, and I'm sure fans that are playing it years later love that, but it's not really what I wanted. I wish the stats were more streamlined, and they dove deeper into the freedom of customization and the storylines instead. I think the storylines of members and the enclaves around the map give a much bigger sense of community than the stats of how much food your characters eat. Some of my most memorable moments in open world games are the storylines from side quest missions. Those are the most fun.
Oh my god!
It just feels like the devs' vision for State of Decay 2 and where I thought they would take the franchise are two different things. It's strange. It's like you can see the underlying workings of the game. It's a very bizarre game to me. I kept playing and playing, putting in more hours, asking questions online, waiting for the game to actually start. Then eventually I realized the game from the first hour is the game. Like, the game really just is keeping track of the plus or minus ratio of your resources. There are a selection of mods that randomly spawn on the map, which can allow you to build more complex facilities in your base, giving you more options to gather and produce resources. But realistically, you get pretty much the main quest right off the bat, and it's up to you to make the length of the game as long as you want. I honestly was putting off the main mission, just working on my base, getting guns, trying to do the side missions, but realized pretty quickly I was getting duplicated side missions that just felt like empty content. After the repetitiveness started to show itself, I thought, okay, I guess it's time to start doing the main quest, I guess. Only to find out I already had done the main quest. There's like zero pacing. There's pacing in the intro, obviously that's like a tutorial section. Then maybe like the first few hours is you're focused on getting a bigger base and better weapons, but it honestly really doesn't take that long to make a few outposts, get some lethal blades, and maybe some weapons to start clearing out the plague hearts. I had no idea clearing the plague hearts was the main quest. I thought it was going to be the very start of the actual main quest line, and it ended up being the entire campaign. I had a builder as a hero, so after I cleared the plague hearts, it then told me to start building things. I was like, what? I'm already 50 hours in. I've already moved bases twice. I already have all my facilities ranked up. I had to destroy all my facilities just to rebuild them to complete the objectives of the final mission. Then the final objective was like the most anticlimactic thing ever. It honestly was no different than the rest of the time zombies tried raiding my base. My community wiped them out without a hitch. Cue credits. I was like, wow. And that's pretty common with this game. Unless you ask online or read, you'll have no idea what's going on in your first playthrough. What exactly is the difference between skills? Why do you want this skill over that? What does that mod do? There's a lot to learn. After voicing my displeasure with the lack of narrative elements in the campaign, I was told, try Heartland mode. It was more story and character driven. So I thought, great, that's perfect. Heartland is a complete failure of game design to me. It just feels like a mirror copy of the same issues I had with the campaign. It's a bit baffling. It feels like the very start of a game. Like they're just introducing a few small missions to kick off the actual story questline, but that ends up being the main questline. Sound familiar? It doesn't feel like an actual crafted campaign or mission. I once again could not believe it once the credits rolled for Heartland. So, as a campaign game, with story and a sense of progression through missions, there's pretty much nothing to recommend. I'd go as far as to say do not play it if that's what you want. It's practically non-existent. That being said, I did put 114 hours into this game. So there is substance and content. There's fun to be had. There's even still an active community with members posting every day on Reddit. Recommending the game is hard though, because the style of the game is so strange. It really is the same thing over and over again, with the only real objective being keeping a positive balance of resources, cycling through an endless, randomly generated pool of survivors, and trying to farm the best stats, which all just goes back to trying to keep that stat sheet balanced. I don't mean to reduce the game to an oversimplification. I only do that to make it clear what the game is at its core. Even though I didn't really care about the stats or the traits, I still found entertainment in doing runs for loot while smashing and killing zombies. Just that alone was still enough for me to have fun, even though State of Decay 2 didn't end up being the game I was hoping for. The thrill of going out on your own, rummaging through buildings and fighting zombies is still there. And to be honest, that's my favorite part of the genre. Or is it genre? Considering the game is still being updated, and the infinite looping nature of this game, I'll probably keep making videos on it over time as my opinion changes with it. Even after 100 hours, I didn't unlock everything or find everything. I'll see people post online about stuff I never even heard of. There's a ton of content with State of Decay 2, more than I'll ever get to. So the question is whether you will like the gameplay loop enough and stay with it long enough to enjoy it all. There are still a bunch of maps I haven't touched, facilities I haven't created, and weapons I never used, but I thought it was time for me to move on and try different games. If you're in the mood for a zombie game and like the survival genre, it's a pretty easy recommendation.